The summoning. The celestial amphitheater floated in the void between stars, a monument to galactic justice older than most civilizations. Its crystalline walls hummed with translation matrices as representatives from 700 species gathered for what they believed would be a simple tribunal. Ambassador Kira Vance stood alone in the defendant's circle, her dark skin contrasting sharply against the white marble floor. She wore the formal uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, midnight blue with silver threading that caught the light from 1,000 observation screens. Her expression remained calm, almost serene, despite the weight of accusatory stares pressing down from every tier. "The human stands accused," announced Procurator Zeshval, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence across his segmented face. The insectoid magistrate's mandibles clicked with barely concealed satisfaction. "Accused of violating the preservation statutes, of interfering with protected conflicts, and of willfully disrupting the natural order of galactic affairs." Kira's hands remained clasped behind her back. She'd been trained for this moment, though perhaps not under these exact circumstances. In the observation deck, Captain Marcus Thorne watched through reinforced glass, his jaw tight. The military advisor's fingers drummed against the armrest of his seat, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. Beside him sat Dr. Ilara Chin, the xenoanthropologist who'd warned them this day would come. "They're not even trying to hide their bias," Marcus muttered. Ilara's eyes never left the amphitheater floor. "The Vexith Empire has been planning this for months. Look at the gallery composition. Every species present owes them trade debts or military favors." She was right. The amphitheater's tiered seating formed a perfect circle, but the distribution of species told a story. The Vexith and their vassals occupied the prime positions, their purple-hued armor gleaming under the chamber's ambient light. Smaller, independent species huddled in the back sections, their representatives looking uncomfortable. Procurator Zeshval continued, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. 3 cycles ago, humanity discovered a species designated as Catalog Entry 7749. The Mirati they called themselves. A primitive civilization barely capable of planetary defense. Holographic displays materialized above Kira's head, showing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow sun. The planet rotated slowly, continents visible through wispy cloud cover. According to Galactic Council law, specifically the preservation statutes enacted 6,000 years ago, pre-spaceflight civilizations are to remain undisturbed. They are to develop naturally without outside interference. This law exists to maintain the cosmic balance, to ensure that evolution, both biological and cultural, follows its intended path. Kira finally spoke, her voice clear and unwavering. "And what happens when that natural development includes extinction?" A murmur rippled through the assembly. Zeshval's antennae twitched in annoyance. "The defendant will speak only when directly questioned," he snapped. But Kira had already planted the seed. She could see it in the way some of the independent species representatives leaned forward, their interest piqued. "Let the record show," Zeshval continued, clearly eager to move past the interruption, "that humanity detected an asteroid on collision course with Mirati Prime. A natural occurrence. An event that would have, in accordance with cosmic law, determined whether the Mirati species deserved to continue." The holographic display shifted, showing simulation data. A massive rock, 30 kilometers across, hurtling toward the planet. Impact calculations scrolled past, extinction level event, atmospheric ignition, total biosphere collapse. Humanity, Zeshval's voice dripped with contempt, decided they knew better than nature itself. Better than the Council's wisdom. Better than 6,000 years of precedent. They intervened. New images appeared. Terran vessels, smaller than the Vexith cruisers but faster, more agile. They showed the asteroid being diverted, split into smaller pieces, guided into the planet's ocean where the impact would be survivable. By doing so, Zeshval declared, they violated our most sacred laws. They proved that humanity cannot be trusted with the responsibilities of spacefaring civilization. They have demonstrated that your species lacks the wisdom necessary for Council membership. Marcus leaned toward Ilara. "They're not even mentioning that the Vexith were the ones who knocked that asteroid off its original trajectory." "They won't," Ilara whispered back. "Because they can't prove it. All we have are gravitational anomalies and suspicious timing." The Vexith covered their tracks well. On the amphitheater floor, Kira remained still as a statue. She knew what was coming. They all did. This trial wasn't about justice, it was about power. The Vexith Empire had controlled galactic affairs for 3 centuries, and humanity's rapid expansion threatened that control. Zeshval raised his primary arms. The prosecution calls its first witness, Hierarch Dravik of the Vexith Imperial Command. The chamber's lights dimmed as a towering figure emerged from the shadows. The prosecution's web. Hierarch Dravik entered the amphitheater like a storm made flesh. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his form was humanoid but unmistakably alien, skin like polished obsidian, eyes that glowed with internal bioluminescence, and a crown of crystalline protrusions that marked his rank within the Vexith hierarchy. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Hierarch, Procurator Zeshval began, his tone shifting to one of deep respect. Please describe for the council what you witnessed regarding humanity's interference. Dravik's voice resonated with harmonic undertones, a feature of Vexith vocal anatomy that made their speech seem almost musical. It had taken humanity months to realize this biological advantage gave them subtle persuasive power in galactic politics. The Vexith Empire has maintained observation posts throughout this sector for millennia, Dravik stated, his glowing eyes fixed on Kira. We monitor developing civilizations, catalog them, and ensure the preservation statutes are upheld. When sensors detected unusual gravitational readings near System 7749, we investigated. The holographic display shifted again, now showing Vexith surveillance footage. The images were crisp, detailed, far superior to standard council recording technology. What we discovered was shocking, Dravik continued. Terran vessels, including their flagship Defiant Hope, had entered the system in clear violation of quarantine protocols. They deployed mining drones to the asteroid designated Proximity Object 13. These drones fragmented and redirected the asteroid using precision explosives. Marcus felt his anger rising. Every word Dravik spoke was technically true, but the framing stripped away all context. He wanted to shout, to interrupt, to force them to acknowledge the larger truth. Ilara's hand on his arm stopped him. Not yet, she whispered. Let them build their case. The higher they stack it, the harder it falls. On the floor, Kira finally spoke. Hierarch Dravik, when exactly did your sensors detect the gravitational anomalies you mentioned? Zeshval's mandibles clicked sharply. The defendant has not been granted permission. I'll answer, Dravik interrupted smoothly. Transparency serves truth. We detected the anomalies approximately 8 standard days before the Terran intervention. 8 days, Kira repeated, letting the number hang in the air. And in those 8 days, did the Vexith Empire take any action regarding the impending collision? A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed Dravik's features. The preservation statutes prohibit interference. We observed as the law requires. Even though you knew an entire species would die? Nature determines which species survive, Dravik replied, his tone hardening. The Council's laws exist precisely to prevent the chaos that results when lesser civilizations, he paused deliberately, newer civilizations, presumed to play God. The insult was clear and Kira felt the atmosphere in the chamber shift. But she kept her expression neutral. Losing her temper now would be exactly what they wanted. Zeshval seized control of the proceedings again. The Hierarch's point is precisely what this tribunal must address. Humanity is a newcomer to galactic affairs. Your species achieved faster-than-light travel merely 43 years ago. Yet you presume to know better than civilizations that have navigated the stars for thousands of years. He turned to address the full assembly. The preservation statutes were written in the aftermath of the Convergence Wars, when well-meaning interference nearly destroyed a quarter of known space. They were written by beings far wiser than ourselves, by species that learned through terrible cost that cosmic evolution must not be disrupted. In the observation deck, Dr. Chen pulled up her datapad, fingers flying across the screen. There, she muttered, highlighting a section of the historical records. The Convergence Wars. Marcus, look at this. Marcus leaned over, reading quickly. His eyes widened. The Vexith weren't even space-capable during the Convergence Wars. They were one of the species that received uplift technology from the Kethri Collective, Ilara finished. Who violated the preservation statutes to save the Vexith from a planetary plague. Without interference, the Vexith would have gone extinct 2,000 years ago. The hypocrisy is breathtaking, Marcus said. It's worse than hypocrisy, Ilara replied. It's strategic. They're using laws they once benefited from to eliminate competition. Back on the amphitheater floor, more witnesses were being called. A Solonian trade commissioner testified about humanity's aggressive expansion into previously unclaimed systems. A Korthan military observer described Terran defensive capabilities in terms that made them sound threatening rather than prudent. A Nephrite economist presented data showing how human trade routes were disrupting established commercial networks. Each testimony added another strand to the web being woven around humanity. Each witness carefully avoiding any mention of Vexith manipulation, of coerced testimonies, of the threats made to smaller species to ensure their cooperation. Kira stood through it all, her posture never wavering, her expression revealing nothing. Finally, as the 7th hour of testimony concluded, Procurator Zeshval turned to her. The prosecution rests. Ambassador Vance, you will now present humanity's defense. Kira smiled for the first time since entering the amphitheater. I have no defense to present, she said clearly. Because humanity is not the one on trial here. The first blade. Confusion rippled through the celestial amphitheater like wind across water. Representatives whispered to one another, translation matrices struggling to keep pace with the sudden cacophony of voices. Even Procurator Zeshval seemed momentarily stunned, his antennae quivering uncertainly. Explain yourself, he demanded once order was restored. You stand accused. You must defend against these charges or accept judgment. Kira's smile remained. It wasn't warm or friendly, it was the smile of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Oh, I'll explain, she said. But first I have questions. Real questions, not the rhetorical performances we've witnessed today. Questions about who actually violated the preservation statutes and why. This is highly irregular, Zeshval began. This entire tribunal is irregular, Kira interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut. You've presented hours of testimony about humanity's actions, but you've carefully avoided discussing the cause. So let me ask Hierarch Dravik directly, how did Proximity Object 13 leave its stable orbit? Dravik's bioluminescent eyes narrowed. Natural gravitational perturbations. Common in asteroid belts. Natural, Kira repeated. Dr. Chen, if you would? In the observation deck, Ilara stood, her hands shaking slightly as she activated her remote interface. The amphitheater's holographic system flickered, then displayed new data, calculations, trajectory models, gravitational wave analysis. Who authorized this display? Zeshval demanded, but his voice lacked its earlier authority. I did, came a new voice from the upper tiers. Counselor Myrith of the Kelvani Protectorate rose from her seat, her silver feathers ruffling with agitation. I am invoking my right as a council member to introduce evidence relevant to these proceedings. Dravik's expression darkened. Counselor Myrith, you were told? Told what, Hierarch? Myrith's voice carried clearly through the chamber. Told to remain silent? Told to ignore my oath to truth and justice? The Kelvani Protectorate may be small, but we still have voices. Kira seized the moment. The data Dr. Chen is presenting shows gravitational wave patterns detected 9 days before the asteroid's trajectory changed. These waves are consistent with directed energy weapons, specifically the torsion beam technology unique to Vexith heavy cruisers. The chamber erupted. Shouts of denial from the Vexith delegation clashed with demands for explanation from independent species. Zeshval hammered his gavel, the sound amplified to painful levels. Silence. When order returned, it was fragile, ready to shatter at the slightest provocation. These accusations are absurd, Dravik said, his harmonic voice strained. Humanity presents fabricated data to deflect from their admitted guilt. They do not deny interfering, they simply try to justify it with paranoid conspiracy theories. Then you won't mind if we examine your surveillance data more closely, Kira replied. The footage you presented showed 8 days of observation. But Dr. Chen's sensors detected unusual Vexith ship movements in the system 10 days before impact. Where is that footage, Hierarch? Our ships patrol many systems. We cannot be expected to record every movement. Yet you recorded our intervention in perfect detail, Kira pressed. Almost as if you were waiting for it. As if you knew we would come. Marcus stood in the observation deck, his heart pounding. This was the gamble they'd prepared for, the confrontation they knew would make or break not just the trial, but humanity's entire future in galactic politics. Counselor Myrith spoke again. I have reviewed the Kelvani Protectorate's independent sensor data. We maintain monitoring stations throughout this sector as part of our commercial shipping operations. Our records show a Vexith heavy cruiser, the Eternal Dominion, conducting unusual maneuvers near Proximity Object 13 9 days before the collision event. Commercial sensors are unreliable, Dravik started. Are you calling me a liar, Hierarch? Myrith's feathers had gone from silver to a threatening crimson. My people have no quarrel with humanity. We have no reason to fabricate evidence. But we do have reason to question why the Vexith Empire would deliberately engineer an extinction event and then prosecute those who prevented it. The chamber exploded again, but this time the energy was different. Species that had remained neutral were now shouting questions. The carefully orchestrated trial was collapsing into chaos. Kira raised her voice above the din. The truth is simple. The Vexith Empire saw an opportunity. They detected a developing civilization in a resource-rich system. They engineered a natural-looking catastrophe. They planned to claim the system after the extinction, as is legally permitted for unclaimed worlds. What they didn't anticipate was that humanity would be watching. That we would act. You admit to violating the preservation statutes. Zeshval tried desperately to regain control. We admit to saving lives, Kira shot back. And we're prepared to prove that the real crime here was committed by the Vexith Empire. Dravik stood to his full imposing height. You have no proof. You have correlations and coincidences, nothing more. Kira's smile widened. Actually, Hierarch, we have something much better. We have your ship's captain. The defector. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For a moment even the chaos stilled. Every eye in the celestial amphitheater turned to Kira Vance, then to Hierarch Dravik, whose bioluminescent eyes had suddenly blazed with incandescent fury. Impossible, he hissed, the musical quality of his voice replaced by something primal and dangerous. The crew of the Eternal Dominion are loyal. They would never betray the Empire? Kira finished. You're right. They wouldn't. But Captain Jannah didn't betray the Empire, she betrayed you. The chamber's main entrance irised open. Through it walked a Vexith female, smaller than Dravik but sharing the same obsidian skin and crystalline crown. Her uniform bore the marks of military service, but the Empire's insignia had been removed, leaving only the outline of where it had been. Captain Jannah's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. My name is Jannah Korthas, former commander of the heavy cruiser Eternal Dominion. I am here to testify about crimes committed in the Vexith Empire's name. Traitor. Dravik's roar shook the amphitheater. You will be executed for this. Perhaps, Jannah replied, moving to stand beside Kira. But I will die knowing I spoke truth. That is more than you can say, Hierarch. Procurator Zeshval seemed paralyzed, his mandibles frozen mid-click. This had gone so far beyond the scripted trial he'd prepared that he appeared genuinely lost. Counselor Myrith seized the opportunity. I move that we hear Captain Jannah's testimony. If these accusations have merit, they supersede the charges against humanity. Seconded, came a voice from another tier. Then another. Within moments, a chorus of support echoed through the chamber. The smaller species, the independent voices that had been bullied into silence, were finding their courage. Zeshval had no choice. The motion passes. Captain Jannah, you may speak. Jannah activated her own data pad, and new holographic displays materialized. These showed internal Vexith communications, ship logs, targeting solutions. 3 months ago, I received classified orders directly from Hierarch Dravik, she began. We were to proceed to System 7749 and create what would appear to be a natural extinction event. The asteroid designated Proximity Object 13 was in a stable orbit. We were ordered to use torsion beams to destabilize it, sending it on a collision course with the inhabited planet. She lies. Dravik shouted. These documents are forgeries. Then explain this. Jannah expanded one image, a command authorization bearing Dravik's personal encryption signature. This is your cipher, Hierarch. Unique to you, impossible to forge. I had the Kelvani Protectorate's cryptographic analysts verify it. Elara watched from the observation deck, her heart racing. They'd spent weeks convincing Jannah to defect, offering her asylum, protection, a new life. The captain had wrestled with her conscience, torn between loyalty to her people and horror at what she'd been ordered to do. Why? Someone shouted from the assembly. Why would the Vexith do this? Jannah turned to face the full amphitheater. Because the Mirati system sits at a strategic crossroads between Vexith space and expanding human territory. It contains 3 viable planets, rich mineral deposits, and natural jump points for faster-than-light travel. Under Galactic Council law, the Empire cannot simply claim inhabited systems. But if the inhabitants die from natural causes, the system becomes available for colonization, Kira finished. And the Vexith would be first to claim it, establishing a forward position that would effectively box humanity into a corner of space with limited expansion options. The implications rippled through the assembly. This wasn't just about one system or one crime, It revealed a pattern of manipulation that many species had suspected but never proven. Furthermore, Jinnah continued, I was ordered to ensure that if humanity intervened, which intelligence reports suggested they might, we were to document their interference completely. The trial was planned before the asteroid was even moved. We were creating both the crime and the punishment. Marcus stood in the observation deck, watching Dravik's carefully constructed facade crumbling. The hierarch's skin had lost some of its luster, his bioluminescence flickering like a dying star. These are the ravings of a disturbed individual, Dravik tried, but his voice lacked conviction. She was removed from command for psychological instability. I was removed from command 3 days ago, Jinnah interrupted, when you discovered I had copied the operational logs. I barely escaped with my life. 2 of my officers who helped me are dead, killed by your security forces. Their sacrifice will not be meaningless. The chamber fell silent. In that silence something shifted. The balance of power that had seemed so firmly in the Vexith Empire's grasp was slipping away like sand through desperate fingers. Kira spoke into that silence. Procurator Zeshval, I believe the charges against humanity should be dismissed. And new charges should be filed, against Hierarch Dravik and the Vexith Empire for genocide, for attempted mass murder, and for gross manipulation of council law. I concur, said Councillor Myrith. As do we, chorused a dozen voices. The trial had turned. The reckoning. Hierarch Dravik stood motionless, his towering form suddenly seeming smaller despite his physical size. The bioluminescence in his eyes flickered erratically, a tell that any experienced Vexith observer would recognize as barely contained rage mixed with something rarer, fear. Procurator Zeshval's compound eyes darted between Dravik, Kira, and Captain Jinnah. His mandibles worked soundlessly as if searching for words that wouldn't come. The insectoid magistrate had built his career on managing predetermined outcomes, and this situation had spiraled far beyond his control. This tribunal will recess, he finally managed, his voice lacking its earlier authority. We must review. No. The word came from an unexpected source. Archon Veltros of the Synthesis Concordat rose from the highest tier, his energy form shimmering within its containment suit. The Concordat rarely involved themselves in council politics, preferring observation to participation. When they spoke, others listened. No recess, Veltros continued, his voice like wind chimes in a storm. Too many recesses have allowed too many truths to be buried. We will hear this matter to its conclusion now while all evidence and witnesses are present. The Archon's intervention shifted everything. The Synthesis Concordat was older than the Council itself, one of the few species that commanded universal respect. Even the Vexith delegation didn't dare protest. Kira felt a surge of hope. This was the moment they'd been working toward, but it still felt surreal. Thank you, Archon. With the Council's permission, I'd like to present additional evidence. Proceed, Veltros replied. Marcus activated the next sequence of prepared materials. The holographic displays transformed, showing not just the Mirati incident, but a pattern spanning decades. Systems mysteriously becoming uninhabitable. Asteroids mysteriously changing course. Promising civilizations mysteriously collapsing just before reaching spaceflight capability. Over the past 43 years, Kira explained, since humanity achieved FTL travel, we've been exploring and cataloging systems in our sector. We've made a disturbing discovery. 8 separate developing civilizations have experienced extinction-level events. All 8 were in systems that the Vexith Empire colonized within months of the catastrophes. Correlation is not causation, Dravik argued, but his voice had lost its harmonic resonance. Space is dangerous. Developing civilizations are fragile. These are tragic coincidences. We thought so too, Ilara interjected from the observation deck, her voice amplified by the chamber systems. Until we analyzed the gravitational wave signatures. 7 of the 8 events show the same torsion beam patterns. The 8th shows evidence of deliberate viral introduction, biological warfare. The chamber erupted again. Species that had lost neighbors, that had wondered about mysterious extinctions in their own regions of space, were suddenly seeing those events in a new light. Captain Jinnah stepped forward. I can confirm 3 of these operations. I was not the commanding officer, but I served aboard vessels involved in the Kelthra collapse and the Vren extinction. Both were engineered. Both were presented to the crews as necessary actions for Imperial security. How many? The question came from Councillor Tyreek of the Namari Republic, his leonine features twisted with disgust. How many civilizations has the Vexith Empire murdered? Dravik's composure finally shattered completely. We did what was necessary. You speak of murder, but you understand nothing of governance, of the burden of maintaining galactic order. The Vexith Empire has kept the peace for 3 centuries. We have prevented wars, maintained stability, ensured prosperity. By slaughtering anyone who might challenge your dominance, Kira cut him off. By violating the very laws you accused us of breaking. By turning the preservation statutes into a weapon, protecting some species while systematically eliminating others. Young species die, Dravik snarled. It is the natural order. We simply accelerate the process for those that pose strategic complications. It is no different than pruning a garden to ensure the strongest plants flourish. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Even the Vexith delegation recoiled. Several of the hierarch's own attendants were staring at him in horror, realizing perhaps for the first time the full scope of what their empire had done. Procurator HFY seemed to deflate. Hierarch Dravik, you cannot. The preservation statutes were written to prevent exactly this kind of. The statutes were written by species too weak to make hard choices. Dravik's voice rose to a thunderous roar. They built their laws on sentiment and moral posturing while reality demanded pragmatism. The Vexith Empire understood this. We did what others lacked the courage to do. You did what you lacked the morality to restrain yourself from doing, Archon Veltros corrected, his energy form burning brighter within its containment. You have perverted law into tyranny. You have transformed peace into oppression. You have made the Council complicit in genocide through our inaction. Kira seized the moment. I move that the charges against humanity be dismissed immediately, and that Hierarch Dravik and all Vexith officials involved in these crimes be taken into custody to face trial for violations of the Galactic Concordat, the preservation statutes, and the fundamental rights of sentient beings. Seconded, came a chorus of voices. The Empire fractures. The vote wasn't even close. 473 species voted to dismiss all charges against humanity. Only 27 abstained. The Vexith delegation stood alone in opposition, their isolation complete and damning. But before Procurator HFY could formally arrest Dravik, the hierarch threw back his head and laughed, a sound like shattering crystal that sent shivers through the assembly. You think this ends here? Dravik's bioluminescence blazed with renewed intensity. You think a vote in this pathetic theater means anything? The Vexith Empire controls 300 star systems. We command the most powerful fleet in known space. We have shaped galactic policy for 3 centuries, and we will continue to do so, with or without the Council's blessing. His hand moved to his belt, triggering a personal shield that encased him in a shimmering energy barrier. Simultaneously, the Vexith delegation activated their own shields. This council is dissolved, Dravik declared. The Vexith Empire withdraws from all treaties and agreements. Any species that attempts to interfere with imperial interests will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Security forces rushed toward the Vexith delegation, but the shields held. Dravik touched another control, and a transport beacon activated. Within seconds, the Vexith representatives shimmered and vanished, teleported back to their vessels. Alarms blared throughout the celestial amphitheater. Warning systems detected multiple Vexith warships decloaking around the station, their weapons charging. All delegates to emergency evacuation stations. HFY's voice cracked with panic. This facility is not designed to withstand military assault. But Marcus was already moving. He'd anticipated this possibility. Dravik was too proud, too powerful to submit to judgment peacefully. The captain touched his communicator. Define hope, this is Thorn. Execute protocol Razor. In orbit beyond the station, humanity's flagship had been waiting. Not alone as it turned out. Over the past 3 months, while Kira had prepared for the trial, Marcus had been conducting diplomacy of a different kind. The space around the celestial amphitheater lit up as ships from 40 different species dropped out of FTL. The Kelvani Protectorate had brought their merchant warrior fleet. The Namari Republic deployed their hunter packs. The Synthesis Concordat manifested energy constructs that dwarfed even the largest Vexith dreadnoughts. Most surprising was the presence of Vexith vessels, a full squadron flying new colors. Captain Janah's defection hadn't been isolated. Word of Dravik's crimes had spread through the Imperial Navy, carried by officers who still believed in honor. Commander Reth Kalvax, captain of the Vexith heavy cruiser Truth's Dawn, opened a channel that broadcast to both the station and the hostile fleet. Hierarch Dravik, this is Commander Kalvax. I am speaking for the Vexith Reform Fleet, representing 67 ships and their crews. We will not fire on civilians. We will not perpetuate the Empire's crimes. Stand down or we will join the Allied forces in subduing you. On the bridge of his flagship Celestial Dominion, Dravik stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His numerical advantage had evaporated. Worse, he was facing mutiny from within his own navy. Kalvax, you and every traitor with you will be executed, Dravik transmitted. Your families will be stripped of rank and property. Your names will be. Our names will be remembered as those who said, enough, Kalvax interrupted. We are Vexith Hierarch. We are proud warriors with a noble history. What you have made us into, genocidal monsters hiding behind laws we mock, that is not who we are meant to be. The standoff hung by a thread. Dravik's fingers hovered over the firing authorization. One command would trigger the largest space battle in 3 centuries. Then Archon Veltros spoke, his voice carried on quantum frequencies that bypassed all communication systems, speaking directly to the minds of everyone present. Hierarch Dravik. You stand at a precipice. Order your fleet to fire and they will be destroyed. Many will die on all sides. But the outcome is certain. The Synthesis Concordat alone possesses the power to neutralize your entire force. We have remained neutral for millennia, but we will not permit the Celestial Amphitheater to be attacked. Choose. The silence stretched. Marcus watched the tactical display, his hand on the weapon's authorization, praying Dravik would see reason. Finally, the Hierarch's transmission came through, his voice hollow. The Vexith Empire will withdraw. But this is not over. Humanity has won this battle through deception and manipulation. You have turned our own people against us, corrupted them with your propaganda. Know this, the Empire will remember. We will rebuild. And when we return, there will be a reckoning. The Vexith fleet engaged their FTL drives and vanished. The Celestial Amphitheater erupted in cheers, but Kira felt no triumph. She knew the war had only just begun. In the observation deck, Ilara looked at Marcus. We've made an enemy that won't forgive or forget. No, Marcus agreed. But we've also made allies. That's what changes everything. The New Order. 3 months later, Kira stood on the observation deck of the Defiant Hope, watching the construction of something unprecedented in galactic history. The Phoenix Assembly, they were calling it, a new diplomatic station built not by one species, but by 47 working in cooperation. Where the Celestial Amphitheater had been a monument to ancient power, the Phoenix Assembly was being designed as a symbol of shared governance. Ambassador Vance? A young officer approached. Lieutenant Saren Welks, one of the new generation of human diplomats who'd grown up knowing the stars. The inaugural session is ready to begin. Kira nodded, taking one last look at the construction. Vexith ships, those loyal to the Reform Fleet, worked alongside Kelvani vessels. Human engineers coordinated with Namari fabricators. It was messy, inefficient compared to the old Imperial methods, but it was real cooperation, not enforced submission. The assembly hall was smaller than the Celestial Amphitheater, more intimate. Instead of tiered seating designed to emphasize hierarchy, species sat in a circular arrangement. Every voice would be equal here. Councillor Myrith, elected as the Phoenix Assembly's first chair, called the session to order. Her silver feathers had grown back to their natural coloring, no longer showing the stress crimson they displayed during the trial. We gather today, Myrith began, to address the aftermath of the Vexith crisis and to forge new agreements for cooperation and mutual defense. Ambassador Vance, you have the floor. Kira stood, feeling the weight of history. 3 months ago, humanity was on trial for violating the preservation statutes. Today, I propose we abolish those statutes entirely. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. Even allies like Councillor Tyreek looked concerned. Hear me out, Kira continued. The statutes were created with good intentions, to prevent the kind of destructive interference that caused the Convergence Wars. But they've been perverted into a weapon. Worse, they're based on a flawed premise, that we can determine which species deserve to survive and which should be left to die. She activated a holographic display showing the Mirati system. The Mirati people are thriving. Their planet was saved from extinction. Yes, they know they're not alone in the universe now. Yes, their development has been altered. But they're alive. Their children have futures. Isn't that worth more than ideological purity? Dr. Chin stepped forward, adding her analysis. We've studied 47 civilizations that went extinct, naturally, in the past 1,000 years. Our models suggest that at least 32 could have been saved with minimal intervention. Asteroid deflection, disease eradication, climate stabilization. 32 species lost forever, because we decided non-interference was more important than life itself. Commander Kalvax spoke from the Vexith Reform delegation. The old empire used the statutes to justify atrocity. But my people also used them to excuse inaction. It is easier to watch from afar and call it natural order than to wrestle with the moral complexity of intervention. Ambassador Vance is right. These laws must be reformed. The debate lasted for hours. Some species feared that abandoning the statutes would lead to cultural imperialism, to powerful civilizations forcing their values on weaker ones. Others argued that the risk was worth taking to save lives. Finally, Archon Veltros spoke. The Synthesis Concordat has observed galactic civilization for 12,000 years. We have seen the preservation statutes prevent some harm. We have also seen them enable far greater suffering. Perhaps the answer lies not in rigid law, but in flexible wisdom. He projected a new framework, the Compact of Compassionate Intervention. Under its terms, spacefaring civilizations could intervene to prevent extinction-level events, but only under strict oversight. A rapid response council would evaluate each situation. Interventions would be transparent, documented, and subject to review. Species that received aid would be offered contact and education, not exploitation or colonization. It wasn't perfect. Nothing governing trillions of beings across thousands of light-years could be perfect. But it was better. The vote was closer than the trial had been. Change always faced resistance. But when the count finished, the compact had passed. Marcus found Kira afterward, both of them exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." "We started it," Kira corrected. "Building a better galaxy is going to take generations." Speaking of which, Ilara joined them. "I just received word from Mirati Prime. They've requested formal diplomatic contact. They want to thank the species that saved them." Kira felt tears welling up. After everything, the trial, the confrontation, the political maneuvering, knowing that the Mirati were alive and thriving made it all worthwhile. Outside the observation port, a Vexith patrol cruiser passed by, its hull bearing new insignia. The old empire was fractured, but pieces were reforming into something better. The process would be painful, but it had begun. Humanity had come to the stars expecting to find their place. Instead, they'd helped reshape the entire galactic order. The trial had ended. The real work was just beginning. And somewhere, in a distant system, a Mirati child looked up at the stars, wondering what other wonders might be waiting out there, never knowing how close they'd come to never seeing those stars at all.